Welcome to the deep dive. For centuries, our whole understanding of human nature has been, well, it's been characterized by this really painful and often destructive split.
A huge split.
Yeah, this great chasm between what the brain does, all the physical, measurable firing of
The
neurons,
science side of
the
things.
science side, and then what the soul does, the part of us we associate with morality, with faith, with our eternal identity.
Hmm.
Neuroscience versus theology.
It's a conflict that's really defined so much of Western thought. And it's created, I think, a lot of confusion for anyone genuinely trying to pursue spiritual growth.
It has.
And that's exactly what our sources today are tackling, just head on. They argue that this whole conflict is, well, it's completely artificial.
Artificial, I like that.
Yeah, and that this divide has to be dissolved if we're ever going to truly understand human transformation, or what they call godliness.
Yep.
The core idea, the thesis, is that human beings are fundamentally embodied souls. You just can't address the soul without the body, and you definitely can't understand the brain without recognizing the, let's say, spiritual director behind it all.
So transformation needs both, the spiritual and the biological.
It requires integrating both. Absolutely.
I really love the imagery they use to frame this whole philosophical mess. It's this analogy of the ancient chasm.
It's a great picture.
It really is. So imagine two great cities, and they're separated by this deep, widening gulf. The city on the east side, they're blessed with this incredible natural abundance, fertile soil, endless food, but they lack technical skill, medicine, knowledge.
Right, and meanwhile, the city on the west is this marvel of human ingenuity. You've got masters of craftsmanship, medicine, wisdom, but their land is barren. They don't have the food they need to survive.
And the chasm between them, it didn't widen because of an earthquake or something. It widened because of suspicion and pride. The West, they looked down on the East's lack of sophistication. They thought their knowledge made them superior.
And the East just dismissed the West's inventions, basically arguing that their abundance made all those complicated skills unnecessary.
So they both just became isolated.
Until desperation hit. Famine in the East, pestilence in the West, and suddenly they realized their survival absolutely depended on each other, on sharing.
They had to finally meet at the edge of that abyss they had helped create and, commit to building a bridge.
And that is our mission today, isn't it? To take the blueprint from these sources, stone by stone, and really connect the soul's moral direction with the brain's biological mechanism.
So where do we start laying those stones?
I think we have to start with the foundational theological principle, the thing that makes this whole integration possible. And that's the biblical call to wholeness.
Okay.
The command isn't just to love God, but to love Him with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's a total, comprehensive, it's a holistic devotion.
And it's interesting, the sources point out this unity, it sort of cuts against two major ways of thinking we see all the time, two kinds of reductionism.
Precisely. On the one hand, it pushes back against materialist reductionism, the idea that we are only biology, just a bunch of firing neurons.
Which would make the soul, morality, God, just illusions.
Exactly. But on the other hand, it also corrects what they call spiritualist reductionism. This is the tendency to treat the body, the brain, physical reality as sort of secondary or even disposable.
As if spiritual growth happens in some kind of disembodied vacuum.
Right.
Right.
But if the command involves mind and strength, then our brains are absolutely central to our spiritual responsibility.
So let's unpack the science side of that. If the brain is central, what is it actually doing? The sources call it the central organ of behavior.
And it's dynamic. It's not a fixed machine.
Yeah.
It has constantly reshaping pathways, what we all know now as neuroplasticity.
Okay, so if we're talking about how a person translates, say, a spiritual goal into a physical action like resisting a temptation or choosing to be kind, there are a few key brain structures we have to look at.
We do. Three main ones.
The first one, and maybe the most uniquely human, is the prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
PFC, right, the CEO of the brain.
Exactly, the CEO. It's doing all the high-level stuff, complex planning, social judgment, and this is the big one.
Self-control.
Self-control. Impulse regulation, all of that.
Then you've got the limbic system. That's more like the emotional alarm system.
The desire engine.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about immediate needs, powerful emotions, desire, the quick hit of reward.
Yeah.
And that relationship between the PFC, the CEO, and the limbic system, that's where so much of our moral struggle really happens.
And the third piece.
The basal ganglia. This part is critical because it's what takes repeated behaviors and embeds them into automatic routines. It's the brain's habit factory.
So whether your habit is being gracious or flying off the handle, the basal ganglia is working to make that automatic, energy efficient.
Exactly. And a materialist would stop right there and say, see, you're just a machine running programs.
Right.
But the sources are so insistent on this point. The soul is still the director. It's the seat of identity, morality, and communion with God.
Okay, I have to pause you there because this is the real sticking point, isn't it? The philosophical friction. If the PFC does the planning and the basal ganglia runs the habits, what's actually left for the soul to do?
Yeah.
Doesn't that undermine free will?
That's a fantastic question. The way the sources clarify it is this. The soul provides the moral compass. It sets the orientation of our desire.
Oh.
The brain gives us the mechanism for thought and action, but the soul determines the why. It sets the ultimate trajectory for our life, and it's the real source of our accountability.
So the mechanisms are neutral.
The mechanisms are neutral, the choices are not. The soul decides what the PSE should focus on, what habits the basal ganglia should be building, and how to respond to the limbic system's alarms.
So the power is really in the synergy. Let's take the choice to cultivate patience. In traffic, maybe.
Perfect example.
The choice to be patient is a spiritual act of will, but it's carried out through the brain's processes. It's the PFC overriding the limbic system's flare-up of anger.
Right, and regulating the physical stress response.
And then accessing the memory of that time you were patient and it worked out.
Yeah.
So every single act of devotion or struggle is a whole person act. That feels like the first big stone on our bridge.
It is.
Okay, so let's shift from the philosophy to the nitty-gritty mechanics of spiritual struggle. And for this, the sources give us this phenomenal deep dive into one single chemical messenger, dopamine.
Ah, dopamine. Probably the most misunderstood neurochemical out there.
We hear pleasure chemical all the time.
Exactly, and that's so misleading. I mean, pleasure is a byproduct, sure. But dopamine's real job and why it matters so much for spiritual life is that it assigns value.
Value.
It motivates behavior. It lays the groundwork for what you'll do in the future. It's basically telling your brain, hey, this thing you're doing right now, this is important, prioritize this.
Just like the brain's internal highlighter. Pay attention, this is valuable. So when we get a reward, that dopamine surge strengthens the whole neural connection, the action, the expectation, the satisfaction. It's a chemical promise.
A promise that says, do this again, you'll get this feeling again.
So how do the sources connect this to the neurological root of sin?
Well, it's fascinating. Sin, especially the kind that offers immediate, intense gratification, is just. It's perfectly structured to hijack these reward circuits.
Okay.
When the soul chooses a harmful, short-term, pleasure-compulsive scrolling, an angry outburst, whatever it is, the reward centers, especially a place called the nucleus accumbens,
The brain's pleasure center.
often called that, yes.
Huh.
It gets hit with a massive, rapid spike of dopamine.
And that spike creates a powerful reinforcement loop, doesn't it? It just deepens that pathway almost instantly.
It does. And this gives us a really clear biological reason why just try harder, why willpower alone so often fails against deep-seated habits. The brain has been chemically trained to expect a reward.
And that expectation, that promise of satisfaction, that's incredibly hard to just think your way out of. It really is like the scriptural language of slavery. It's a biological binding, not just a spiritual one.
Exactly. And we can actually break this whole process down to 3 steps. And these steps show that constant interplay between spiritual choice and physical mechanism. It all starts with attention.
Attention as the gatekeeper. Our sources talk about the reticular activating system, the RAS.
The RAS. Think of it as your brain's internal filter. It's a search engine that decides what you notice and what just becomes background noise.
So if you habitually point your attention toward, say, destructive behaviors, the dopamine release magnifies that and makes it highly salient. It becomes the thing you always notice.
And from attention, you very quickly get craving. And this is a really crucial point. Dopamine doesn't wait for the reward. It surges in anticipation of it.
So the brain is running this satisfying simulation before you've even done anything.
Yes. And that simulation creates this powerful magnetic pull on your will. It's why fighting a craving can feel like you're battling some outside force. The longing has already been chemically signaled.
And then if the choice is made to indulge, that's a reinforcement.
That's it. The action closes the loop, strengthens the pathway. Repetition literally carves these deep, efficient grooves in the brain. The longer you do it, the more automatic it becomes. It moves from a deliberate choice to an almost instinctive reaction.
Which would take a huge amount of effort to redirect.
A huge amount, but And this is the central message of hope in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
That same mechanism facilitates growth,
Yeah.
thanks to neuroplasticity.
Because the brain isn't static, it's always changing. Those grooves, they aren't permanent.
They are not permanent. And this means that spiritual disciplines are not just, spiritual busy work. They are fundamentally neurological retraining exercises.
I love that framing, neurological retraining.
That's what it is. When you repeatedly choose prayer or gratitude or obedience, you are strengthening new alternative pathways. You are literally building new, healthier highways in your brain.
And that process is sanctification. It's the spirit directing the soul's intent and the brain providing the mechanism for that change to become embodied, to become real.
And it makes holiness over time the familiar pattern of life. It's slow, but it's real, and it's measurable.
This integration, it brings us to our third part, the practical payoff. How does this neurotheology actually help? How can it alleviate the burden of shame?
Well, we have to talk about that spiritualist error again, the one that overlooks our embodiment.
Right.
That error is so pastorally damaging because it sets up these completely unrealistic expectations. Dualism, this idea that the soul and body are separate, at war. It tells people that if they were just devoted enough, their body should instantly fall in line.
So when someone is battling an entrenched addiction or chronic anxiety or even just distraction, they get wrongly labeled as not having enough faith.
And they get that unhelpful advice. Just pray harder, read your Bible more.
Without any acknowledgement of the deep neural pathways that have been carved over years, the body's own sensitized nervous system.
And that gap between the effort they're putting in and the results they're seeing, it leads to this intense, unnecessary shame, to spiritual burnout.
So neuroscience can be a tool for compassion here.
Profound pastoral compassion. When a struggle persists, it isn't necessarily proof of a total spiritual failure. It's evidence of the brain's gradual adaptation. Sanctification is a process of rewiring the hardware.
And that awareness is just. It's vital. It keeps us from confusing a genuine neurological vulnerability. The fact that your brain carries scars from past habits with some kind of permanent spiritual failure, that is a massive stone for our bridge.
A huge one.
Okay, so with that compassionate framework, the sources then lay out this integrated approach to transformation, and it's defined by 3 core principles that bridge the spiritual and the biological.
The first one is faith. Now, faith is obviously a spiritual act of trust, but it also actively shapes the brain's perception of reality.
How so?
If you truly believe God's truth is what matters most, your attention networks, that RAS filter we talked about, they start to prioritize divine truth. Cues of grace, they start to filter out the worldly distractions. Faith literally trains the brain what to look for and what to value.
The second principle is repentance. We often think of this as just sorrow, but the sources say it has to be more. An existential reordering, a total turning.
A willingness to actually change direction. And what is astonishing here is that this spiritual act has a distinct, measurable, physical marker. Heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV. This is where the science gets incredibly specific.
It really does. So HRV measures the tiny variations in time between your heartbeats. It's a powerful indicator of your nervous system's balance.
Okay.
When we're stuck in guilt or stress or moral conflict, our nervous system is in a fight-or-flight state. That leads to low HRV, a rigid, inflexible heartbeat pattern.
But when true repentance happens, when that spiritual burden of guilt is lifted and moral balance is restored, what happens then?
The rest and digest system, the parasympathetic nervous system, takes over. The heart rate becomes more varied, more flexible, you get high HRV. It's a physiological reset that mirrors the spiritual turning. It's the embodiment of renewal.
Wow. From stress and rigidity to rest and resilience.
Which brings us to the third principle, renewal. This is the cooperation between the spirit and our sustained discipline. Practices like fasting, contemplative prayer, meditation, they aren't arbitrary rituals.
They are methods designed to work through our embodied reality.
Precisely. They help retrain the body's rhythms, reset those neural pathways, calm the emotional response systems, and that leads to a real, visible, enduring transformation. You see it in greater peace and resilience.
This has been a truly massive deep dive. We started with this idea of a centuries-old chasm. And what our sources are concluding is that neurotheology isn't some new compromise. It's actually a recovery of the original biblical vision of human wholeness.
That the conflict between science and faith is a false chasm. It was created by a misunderstanding.
It was.
And here's the profound implication of all this for you, for anyone listening.
Yeah.
You are an integrated being. You cannot escape neurotheology.
There's no opting out.
No. Every single spiritual challenge you face, from resisting temptation to cultivating gratitude, is mediated through this unified system of brain and soul. To ignore the brain's mechanisms is to ignore the very hardware God designed for transformation.
So if your brain is constantly being rewired by what you repeatedly practice, and even more simply by what you give your focus to, consider this. How does your deliberate moment-by-moment choice of attention, what you choose to focus on and prioritize every single day, become the single most essential and moral discipline in your life?